want to tell you about two different things. The first part is my excitement over having my daughter surprise us and come out for the week of Thanksgiving. She's only here for a few days, but nonetheless, she gets to spend Thanksgiving with us. It was a total surprise. She gave me less than 24-hour notice, and I was able to hold that surprise off and surprise her sisters by bringing them to the airport when they thought we were leaving town, and surprising her brother and her dad when we showed up at the house. So that is so exciting, and I'm thrilled to have her. Ready? Let's go! It's raining.
Oh my God! What the hell?
Jesus Christ.
How you doing? Oh my God! Really?
What the hell? What?
The other thing I want to share with you about has something to do with Thanksgiving, but not so much in the traditional sense. Traditionally, when we talk about Thanksgiving, we really go to these, really fundamental pieces, which are family and gratitude. And you've probably heard from other people all the ways that you can find gratitude, right? And you probably get a daily email about something to be grateful for. Family can go all over the spectrum, how to, deal with family when they come for Thanksgiving or the holidays, or how important family is, right? What I want to share with you doesn't really seem related, but it is in the sense that it has to do with our identity. Now, our identity is often built on our roles or our expectations of who we think we should be, and they usually started to form when we were little, right? We were the baby of the family, we were the oldest, we were the black sheep, maybe, we were the rebel, right? And then we decided in high school, or maybe sooner, what are we going to be when we grow up? What's going to be the role? What is the identity? Well, for me, as a child, regardless of the career, I so knew I wanted to be a mom. That was an identity I really wanted. And of course, I started to formulate ideas of what that meant, right? I formulated those ideas based on all the moms I had seen in my life, as well as my own mom. And of course, as I was formulating that idea, I decided what it might mean for me well before I was going to be a mom. Well, I'm not going to do that, and I'm not going to do this. As I became a mom, not just to the first, but to the second, to the third, to the fourth, those identities started to shift. Now, I'll share with you a little bit about why. The first is that we are, of course, these unlimited, multidimensional beings. And what we do with these identities is we play a role, we play a part of our lives. We experience what it's like to be a certain this, that, or the other. You probably have a lot of this, that's, or the others that you are, right? But as we experience these roles, it gives us a sense of our true self. So as I was experiencing what I thought it was, to be a mom, as I was generating ideas, that was showing me one sense of myself. And as I grew into the roles of being a mom of each of my own children, it became something different. More importantly, it has evolved. So what I'm looking like as a mom today is very different than it will be in 10 years from now. Just recently, my son was having an issue, and I said, why don't you talk to me? And he resisted. I mean, he's 18. I don't blame him. But at the same time, I pointed out, I said, every time you do talk to me, I do tend to help you. If you can just open up, I can help you, whatever it might be. So he took me up on it. We sat outside so we could have some privacy. And the first thing he said was, well, you're probably going to get mad. And I said, I always get mad. That's who I am. I'm passionate. And when it comes to someone else doing something that I feel is unjust toward my children, or if they're doing something that feels unjust in some way to me, I'm going to be passionate. I'll always be in that way. That's just how I am. And I always calm down. I always come back to reason, to love, to truth, right? So if you can just, work with me here and let me have that moment of frustration, then we can go forward. But I'm not going to promise you I'm not going to get mad. Interestingly, what he shared with me was not a big deal and I didn't get mad. It was actually kind of sweet, but nonetheless. And how does this relate to Thanksgiving? When we're around family, when we're trying to find gratitude, what happens is, first of all, people project a lot of things on us. So when we're around family, they're going to expect, oh, mom is always like this, or, oh my gosh, this family's like that. In all honesty, our own greater family, my husband's side of the family, has stopped inviting us, right? We're not really part of the family anymore. And I think a lot of it has to do with, oh, they're very much like this. Okay, fine. So we don't fit into a box. We don't watch television. We don't consume on Black Friday or anything like that. And we are a little bit off the grid, and it makes it uncomfortable for people to be around us. I understand that. And then also with gratitude, it's like, oh, I should be grateful I'm a mom. I should be grateful I have these lovely children. Yeah, gratitude is there. And yet, it doesn't have to be tied into my identity. In other words, I don't even need to have these identities. They're just words. They're just ways for me to understand myself, for people to understand me to some degree, but they don't necessarily know me. I'm a very different mom than all the moms in my husband's side of the family. And yet we have some common things. We love our children fiercely, just in different ways. We show them in different ways. Food for thought. I just thought that it was something that would be coming up for you for Thanksgiving, for this week, for the holidays as they approach, because not only are we now expected to be these bigger beings than we thought we were, and I don't mean expected in terms of societal's expectations, but inwardly. We can feel that surge in us growing. You're feeling it. You're feeling that call to say, who am I and what am I? And as you do, all these identities are going to come up to you, and they're going to show you what you've been labeling yourself as and how they can morph, how they can change, how you don't have to be stuck to them, how they want to expand. And in essence, how you can then emerge through all of that. Anyway, we'll talk when we feel so inspired. It was a really lovely Thanksgiving. I enjoyed having my daughter out, and the time went by oh too quickly. She was here for less than 72 hours and is already back in her college town and doing her studies, and I'm back at doing my life as a woman who wears many hats. And it was interesting because at Thanksgiving we had some friends over. A friend of mine has a daughter and son who are about the same age as my oldest two. And it was funny because the topic of identity actually came up. And she was commenting about how she's not sure what she's going to be doing or how she's going to experience her life with, her youngest one, who's a year and a half away from graduation, moving out and becoming his own person. And it's interesting because when we so attach ourselves to our identities, we really believe that they are us. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's no judgment about that at all. In fact, I absolutely love my identities. I love, knowing my momness and my wifeness and my, mysticness, right? Those are all just names and identities that I feel at this point proud to carry, right? Then there are those that I kind of go, oh, I can't wait till I get rid of that identity. At my children's school, I teach, and I enjoyed teaching the children, but I also have a couple of other jobs at the school, which are a little bit heavier. It's like I have way too much on my plate, and so I'm more than happy to let those go. Even though it sounds like cool titles, I can flash a card that says, here's my job, but in reality, it's just a lot for one person to carry. So with the sense of ourselves getting attached to these identities, we can find ourselves feeling obliged for one. So interestingly enough, with this these other jobs that I have at the school, I kept thinking, oh, this is so hard to do, and I'm, where can I find the time to do it? And plus I'm running my own business, and I do all this other stuff, volunteering, this and that and the other. And it's interesting because somebody else is interested in having those jobs, and it was like, oh, thank goodness, this will be a nice transition. So I didn't have to hold on to them, or I still don't. I'm obviously in transition. But the point being is that at the beginning of the year, I thought that it was a have to. It felt very, I'm not one to easily step away from something, to really, if I say I'm going to do something, I like to follow through. That's an identity I hold on to. I think that's a firstborn or only child kind of thing. But it's interesting because the more I was realizing I really don't want to do this, I was able to somehow manifest, I suppose, someone else who is interested in the jobs. But there are those jobs and those identities that we keep because we feel that they really define us. And those are much harder to let go. So if we've really defined ourselves in a certain role, and we've really, lovingly connected with these roles or these identities, they can be harder to release. And I'm not even saying we should release them, but I will say that, you are likely not only experiencing these questions of who am I, but every time you try to formulate an answer, it's probably less and less clear. And part of it is, as we expand in this collective evolution and really try to experience oneness again, that sense of separation and identity, self-identity, will be less and less graspable. And in essence, it will free us even more. But in the meantime, it may feel like this struggle, this back and this forth, this sense of, yes, I am, maybe not. And just to be aware, it's nothing wrong. It's just a shift in consciousness to be aware of and to perhaps embrace and play with as you go along. So in that regard, as the new year comes, perhaps look at ways that you are planning to experience your new self in the new year, because we always want to recreate our identity or ourselves in some way. The weight loss, the stop smoking, the, goals and dreams for our, vision board and such. But so many of those things that we want to achieve are so tied into who we think we are. And in essence, we aren't any of those, really. The last bit that I want to say about identity is really more of an exercise that I thought you could try. And I remember years ago, I read the book Sacred Contracts by Carolyn Mace, and it was a good read. And it was all about identifying our archetypes, right? There was more to it, but there was this aspect about archetypes. And it was really fun to look at what my archetypes might be. As well, growing up in a household that was really all about the New Age metaphysical stuff, I learned very young that I was a Libra and that my mom was an Aries, and just about every sign of everybody I knew, because that was a way to understand and label. As well, I did school in college. I did a test that was personality to see what jobs I might like, and I came up as an ENFJ or something like that. And I recently did that same test on Facebook, and I think it was the same. And all of those can point a direction perhaps to me to say, oh, you really might be good at doing this, or maybe you have this kind of a tendency. Knowing that, I'm a Libra, my mom decided when she raised me to always show me both sides of the story. Her concern was that if she only told me one side, automatically to balance things out, I would pick the other. So she was always trying to be as fair as she could. And of course, as a Libra, I've learned that life isn't fair, and that's been a really tough one to take in, but nonetheless. So in this exercise, what I invite you to do is to write a list of all the things that you identify yourself as. It could be as simple as, mom or sister or father or friend. It could be a little more metaphysical, Aries, whatever. Enneagram, I've never done that one. I need to do that one, I guess. Whatever that might be. And as well, you can even list some aspects of things you like, so you have a sense of, how you identify or how you categorize or how you label yourself. The other thing you could do is maybe make a list of things you used to be that you no longer identify with. So I'm no longer a student, right? I'm no longer a child. I may be an adult child, but I'm no longer a child. And the reason I'm wanting you to look at these lists and to create them, the first being is that when we have an identity that is very strong, it'll probably show up at the top of the list. Most of us aren't so neurotic that we're going to make this list an alphabetical one, but you are invited to do so if that is something you want to do. But those ones that come to the top are the ones that you probably identify with first and foremost. When those start to morph, sometimes we can fear that we are losing who we are, that we no longer count, that our purpose no longer matters. By looking at the other list, and you see what you used to do or you used to be, you'll see that you change, that we all change. Things change in our lives. And you can probably even feel the sadness. Like, let's say one of those identities was daughter, and both of your parents have since passed on. There may be some sadness in there that you are no longer a daughter to alive people. Maybe you'll find relief that you're no longer a child to, angry people. We are trying to experience our true selves as we expand in consciousness, and in so doing, we will find that this identity, these identities are going to, in some ways, hold on a little bit tighter, that we're going to have a harder time letting go because it'll feel like we're losing ourselves. But in some ways, as they shift, as they lighten, as they morph into, not much of anything, or maybe the list gets smaller, we go, and we experience more freedom, and we experience more of our essence. Enjoy being you in all of your identities, and we'll talk again next week.